Welcome to this Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive milestone in medicine, the first major breakthrough in lung fibrosis treatment we've seen in over a decade. If you, or maybe someone you love, has dealt with a severe respiratory disease, you already know that progress can feel agonizingly slow. But recently, a completely new chapter just opened up. So today, we're going to break down the science, the raw data, and the real-world impact behind this monumental shift.
So let's jump right in. I want you to do something really quick. Just take a deep breath with me right now. Feel how your lungs effortlessly expand and fill up with air? Okay. Now imagine your lungs slowly losing that ability to stretch. Imagine that simple, totally thoughtless act of breathing turning into a conscious, exhausting chore. Well, that is the devastating daily reality for hundreds of thousands of people around the world living with a condition that silently and permanently steals their breath.
To really get why this new treatment is such a big deal, we first need to understand the condition itself. It's called Idiopathic Pulmonary Fibrosis, or IPF for short. Now, the word idiopathic basically just means we have no idea what causes it, but we definitely know what it does. It takes your healthy, spongy, flexible lung tissue and turns it into something thick and stiff, sort of like the tough scar tissue you'd get after a really bad cut on your arm. As that tissue scars over, it gets rigid. It can't transfer oxygen into the bloodstream properly anymore, which makes breathing progressively and irreversibly harder.
Understanding pulmonary fibrosis and its physical toll.
Before we can celebrate a breakthrough, we really have to look at the severe reality of this disease. Historically, IPF has offered very little hope and put an incredibly heavy burden on patients and their families. This isn't just your standard winter cough, right? It primarily hits adults in their 60s and 70s. It might start out super subtly. Maybe you get a bit winded doing the dishes, or you have a dry cough that just won't quit. But that internal scarring is profound, and worse, it doesn't heal. Without any treatment at all, the median survival rate after someone gets diagnosed is a heartbreaking 3 to 5 years. It drastically cuts a patient's lifespan short, which is exactly why the race for a better treatment has been so urgent.
Moving on to Section 2, Measuring Lung Capacity and How Doctors Track the Disease. You might be wondering, how do doctors actually know if the lung scarring is getting worse? You always hear the phrase lung decline, but what does that look like in a clinic? Well, they use a test to measure something called forced vital capacity, or FVC, and it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. First, the patient takes the absolute biggest breath they can muster. Next, they blow all of that air out as forcefully and completely as they can into a special tube. Finally, a computer measures the precise volume of air that came out, usually in cubic centimeters. That FVC measurement essentially tells doctors your maximum lung capacity. Over time, as IPF scars the lungs and makes them stiffer, you simply can't hold as much air, so that capacity shrinks.
Section 3, the old treatment standard, flawed but necessary. For over a decade, doctors and patients were essentially just stuck with the tools they had. Back in 2014, 2 drugs were approved to fight this scarring, pirfenidone and nintedanib. And honestly, they were groundbreaking at the time. They successfully slowed down the loss of lung capacity by about half compared to patients who took a placebo. But when you look at the clinical data, that victory came at a massive, exhausting cost to the actual human beings taking the pills.
60%, roughly 60% of patients on the old drug nintedanib suffered from severe diarrhea, along with other really harsh side effects like nausea and vomiting. Just think about that for a second. More than half of all patients were forced into this terrible lose-lose compromise. Choose between preserving your failing lungs or keeping your basic daily comfort. It got so bad that many people had to lower their doses or even quit the medication entirely just because their stomachs literally couldn't handle it.
Which brings us to Section 4, the new breakthrough, Jascayd, a decade in the making.
The struggles with those older treatments perfectly set the stage for our new breakthrough, a drug called Nerandomilast, which goes by the brand name Jascayd. This is a truly historic moment for respiratory medicine. The approval of Jascayd marks the very first time in over 10 years, a full decade, that the FDA has approved a brand new therapy for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. For a community that has been desperately waiting for a better option since 2014, this is a massive beacon of hope.
So how does it actually work? Well, instead of using the older, harsher mechanisms that totally wrecked the stomach, Jascayd takes a totally different approach. It specifically targets an enzyme called PDE4B. To put it simply, rather than acting like a blunt instrument, it acts more like a precision strike against the specific biological pathways that trigger inflammation and scarring in the lungs. It goes right to the source of the fibrosis without creating nearly as much collateral damage in the rest of the body. And the results are wild.
When you break down the phase 3 clinical trial numbers measuring lung capacity over a year, the contrast is just incredible. Keep in mind, lower numbers are better here because we're measuring how much lung volume was lost. Untreated patients on the placebo lost 148 cc of lung capacity over 52 weeks. Patients taking the high dose of Jascade lost 79 cc. But incredibly, the patients on the lower 9 mg dose of Jascade lost a remarkable 9 cc over an entire year. 9! That is practically zero disease progression. It's an absolutely astonishing stabilization of the lungs.
Section 5. Side effects and interactions, the promise, and of course, the caveats. Now, as with any medical advancement we cover, we've got to stay objective and look at the whole picture. No drug is perfect, right? We have to understand the safety profile here. The biggest takeaway is the massive difference in tolerability. Because of Jascade's targeted approach, it brings those awful diarrhea rates way down, from around 60% with the old drugs down to roughly 17 to 26%. And the number of people who quit the drug because of side effects was incredibly low. For the vast majority of people, this means they finally don't have to sacrifice their day-to-day quality of life just to keep their lungs working.
But here's the catch. Doctors are facing a really tricky puzzle when it comes to prescribing this. Since so many IPF patients are already taking the older drugs, combining them can be complicated. The trials showed that if you take Jascade with the old drug nintedanib, totally fine, no problem. But if a patient mixes it with the other old drug, pirfenidone, there is a severe interaction. Pirfenidone basically accelerates the metabolism of the new drug. It literally chews up the Jascade right in the bloodstream. If you take the low dose of Jascade alongside pirfenidone, they basically cancel each other out, leaving almost zero active drug in your system. So, doctors are going to have to be really careful managing these combos.
And finally, Section 6, cost and future hope. The reality of the breakthrough. We've seen the science, but we absolutely have to talk about the financial reality of bringing a medical milestone like this to the market. The wholesale acquisition cost for Jascade is a staggering $194,400 per year. Now, sure, after rebates and intense insurance negotiations, the net price will probably land closer to $140,000 annually. But make no mistake, that is a huge financial burden on the healthcare system, and potentially on patients, depending on their coverage. It is a premium price tag for a highly targeted premium therapy.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Look, while Jascade is not a permanent cure for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, it is unequivocally one of the greatest leaps in stabilizing lung capacity we've seen in modern respiratory medicine. It marks a monumental shift. We are finally moving away from those brutal, harsh therapies and entering an era of high-value, highly tolerable treatments that actually protect a patient's lungs without destroying their daily life.
Which leaves us with one incredibly important question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. With a price tag that high, how is our healthcare system going to ensure this decade-in-the-making breakthrough actually reaches the breathless patients who are quite literally fighting for their next breath? It's an incredible medical triumph for sure, but the next major battle is going to be access. Thanks so much for joining me today to explore this vital topic. Keep asking questions and keep learning.